Anyway, our text this morning is a famous and wonderful text. And you know the song about climbing Jacob's ladder. It's an old Negro spiritual. And then, of course, another song, Stairway to Heaven, was also inspired by this. That's an old Led Zeppelin song, Robert Plant. And I'm not going to sing this morning, but I am going to share this wonderful story with you. Jacob has just stolen the birthright from his older brother Esau. So his father Isaac was well on in years, and he was closing out his life and passing on the blessing. And you know the story where he fakes his brother. He has some rough hair put on his back and his arms, and he covers himself with the smell of animals and goes up to Isaac, his father, and his father is so frail he is not able to distinguish. And he gives his blessing to the son Jacob. Then Esau comes in off the field and asks for the blessing, but you can't do that. The blessing can only be given once, and it was already given to Jacob. So Esau is mad and is going to kill Jacob. And so Jacob decides it might be a good time to go someplace far, far away to see if he can't find a wife. So he's on a journey. He's going from where he was in a place called Beersheba to a place where they all came from way back when, in the land of Haran. It's about a 600-mile journey. And he's on that journey, and he's spending the night, and something very special happens. Meanwhile, Jacob left Beersheba and traveled toward Haran. At sundown, he arrived at a good place to set up camp and stopped there for the night. Jacob found a stone to rest his head against and lay down to sleep. As he slept, he dreamed of a stairway that reached from earth up to heaven, and he saw the angels of God going up and down the stairway. At the top of the stairway stood the Lord, and he said, "I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham and the God of your father Isaac. The ground you are lying on belongs to you. I am giving it to you and your descendants. Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. They will spread out in all directions, to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south, and all the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. What's more, I am with you, and I will protect you wherever you go. One day I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have finished giving you everything I have promised you." Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it." But he was so afraid, and he said, "What an awesome place this is. It is none other than the house of God, the very gateway to heaven." The next morning, Jacob got up very early. He took a stone, the stone he had rested his head against, and set it upright as a memorial pillar. Then he poured olive oil over it. He named that place Bethel, which means house of God, although the name of the village nearby was already Luz. May God add his understanding to this hearing of his word. So Jacob is something of we'd call him a bit of a sociopath. He's one who doesn't seem to care about anything but himself. He will swindle not just his brother, but he will deceive his father at the end of his father's life. Such that one of the last experiences Jacob has with his father Isaac is to perpetrate a big lie to him. Jacob, one of these great patriarchs of the church. He's not a good guy. And he does this and runs. He goes from a place where he has received the blessing, and with that blessing comes all kinds of wonderful, flocks and herds and all the servants and everything else. He got the lion's share of the estate along with this blessing. And so he has gone from one who had this idea of what it was that he wanted in life. He conspired with his mother to get it. And he got it. He had his dream for him, and he got it. And then there was a bit of a price to pay, so rather than face his brother, he decides to just leave. And now, rather than having all of that success on his side, now he's just trying to survive. So he's traveling from one place to another. And he's on his way. And one must assume that he's not thinking spiritual thoughts. One must assume that he's not high-minded. There's no indication in the text itself that he's struggling from angst and guilt and hardship because of what he has done and what he's pulled off. In fact, it seems that he might actually be a little proud of himself because he got away with it. So he's on his way. We really hardly even know, other than this reference to this town Luz, L-U-Z, where he was, but he was someplace between, on that 600-mile journey between Beersheba and Haran, and he goes down to sleep at night. And a dream comes to him. He has a dream. And this is one of those dreams that, well, you've had them. It's so real that you really wonder if you're dreaming or if you're awake. It reminds me of that wonderful scene in the Laurel and Hardy movie. It was a short movie, but Laurel and Hardy, of course, are sleeping in the same bed together, and Laurel sees Hardy's foot up on the footboard, and he pulls out a gun to shoot his foot because he thought it was a robber or something, some crazy thing like that. And he's all upset because Oliver Hardy is mad at him because of this, and he in his whiny voice says, "Well, I was dreaming that I was awake, and I woke up and I found myself asleep." One of those kinds of dreams. Graphic. And it was as he's on his way back up to Haran, which is close to the land of Babylon where they came from. He's got this image in his mind of, and the actual Hebrew word here is a ramp, or perhaps like one of those long staircases that led up to the ziggurat in Babylon. And he has this dream that God has sent this ramp, this ladder, this staircase down. And it's a fascinating perspective because this is not something he has constructed. This isn't the work of Jacob. This is the work of God. God is coming to him. And in this image, we see the angels, the messengers of God, moving up and down, moving from heaven to earth and bringing about the will of God to the earth. And so here is Jacob as he sleeps. And he realizes that despite everything, God loves him. Despite everything, God will bless him. Despite everything up to that point, despite how he has lived his life, there is still an opportunity for him to start new, to have a redemption, to have a fresh start. There is no point in life in which we are done, where we've done so much that God can no longer reach us. And sometimes it might be in one of those wild, crazy, frantically alive dreams. Or it could be in other very subtle ways where we've just been having it our way so much that we begin to realize, even though we may have been fulfilling our dreams didn't do it, weren't enough. Later on in Genesis, there's a story about Joseph. Joseph has a dream that his brothers and his father, Jacob, are all going to bow down to him. That's his dream. That's his dream about him, for him. That everyone's going to bow down to him. He's going to be the top dog. Well, his brothers throw him into a pit, sell him into slavery. He gets hauled off to Egypt. And there in Egypt, he has more dreams. A baker comes to him, and a wine dresser comes to him, or a wine steward comes to him. And then finally the Pharaoh comes to him. What a difference when he's dreaming for himself versus what happens when he's dreaming, or when the dreams that he's been given are dreams that others have. It's one thing to have my dream, but what about living into the dreams that other people have? What about recognizing what other people long for and entering into those dreams? And so, for Joseph, as a result of his dreams, he tanked. And for Joseph, as a result of others' dreams, he succeeded and became the number 2 man in all of Egypt. And yet you go to the commencement ceremonies of high schools and colleges, and they're going to say, never lose track of your dreams, follow your dreams, that cliche of the rites of passage from high school or college into the real world. And in the real world, well, if we don't know by now, we will know sooner or later that our dreams are quickly extinguished by reality. How many people have had the dream of being the American Idol? They line up, hundreds of them, and there's room for only one. And they are so devastated that their dreams have been shattered. Maybe their dreams, maybe our dreams, the dreams that we have for ourselves, are not really the important dreams. Maybe the important dreams are those dreams, not that we conjure for us, but those dreams that come to us perhaps as insights about others, or those moments when we have a sense that God is speaking to us in a fresh new way, that maybe our lives need to take a bit of a change. Maybe we need to make some other decisions. Of course, in our culture, as David Brooks puts it, he says, we live in pursuit of happiness, but we are formed by suffering. Sometimes the best things that can happen to us is for us to get sold off into slavery as Joseph was. Sometimes the best things that can happen to us is for us to have someone who wants to kill us and we have to run away. Sometimes the best thing is for those dreams to be shattered, because what that means is that we are disillusioned. So much of that stuff is illusion until we begin to listen to others and hear what they have to say and what's important to them. What about their dreams? What about their aspirations? And when they share with you something of their heart and what they long for and what they hope for in life, what if their dreams become yours? I was up in Detroit. How long ago was it, George, that I was in Detroit? Yeah, you can't remember either. A couple weeks ago with the Covenant Church, and I shared with you that I went out on a walk in the morning, and I came back, and at the far end of my walk, I turned around and came back, and there is the Renaissance Center. This magnificent, glistening structure in downtown Detroit. And so much of downtown Detroit just is in such need. What was fascinating to me was that there was the Renaissance Center, and as I walked, along where I walked, it was all vacant land, right along the river. And I thought about that, and it just struck me. That Renaissance Center was not a person who had a dream to build something like that. It was many people with tremendous interest in the health and well-being of the city of Detroit, named Renaissance for the possible rebirth of that city. And so if one person has a dream for this, well, that dream then goes to an architect. And that architect has to identify something from that dream to his dream to the builder's dream to all around, and you end up with this large collective effort that brings about this magnificent result. And because of the reality of continued commitment to the city of Detroit, not just by the automakers, but also by the CEO of Quicken. I forget his name, but his name came up several times while I was there. There are now efforts to bring the sports teams down into the core of the city. Why? So I can get rich? So I can have more for me? No, there's a whole city there that longs to be rebirthed, that longs to have economic vitality, where people want to work, people want to serve. And so many people are coming together in that city. And it's not a dream, it's a collective dream where others are coming alongside, and somewhere in the midst of that, perhaps, inasmuch as that kind of effort collects and brings everyone together, do we not know that in the midst of all of that, there are little kids growing up in the shadow of the Renaissance Center who will grow up, and they may be the ones who have the jobs and maybe the leadership, and maybe become in 25 years become the CEO of Chrysler or General Motors or Ford, because of dreams ultimately that are captured by a vision. Vision comes from God. What we call visions are simply our ideas, but our ideas can be tawdry and silly. And driving down to church this morning, I saw what is a common view in Naples, not so much during the off-season as during the season. There was a guy in a loud, what kind of car was it? Maserati, I think it was. He had a big old fat cigar hanging out the side as he's driving. He's probably in his 70s. Woman with him was probably in her 30s. And so he got his dream. Then, contrast that to a young man that I sat with at the Forum Club a couple of years ago. It's when Lely High School was down, and they always bring high school kids up to say a few words at the Forum Club. And I sat next to this young man from Lely High School. He was matriculating at Harvard that fall. And he told me about his older brothers. One was a physician working in New York, and the other one was a financial guy working also in New York, this time in the city. The other one was somewhere in the rest of the state. And he was doing the best he could to follow in the footsteps of his so far wildly successful big brothers. And then he told me the story that his mother carried him walking through the hot desert all the way from Mexico. And his father met up with them at a later time. And they came not because as parents they wanted anything really for them, because they still live up in Immokalee. But they wanted so much for their boys. And we might argue these issues about illegal immigration and all of that, but ultimately what this boils down to, I mean, let's face it, Jacob was not a good guy. Let's face it, we don't have to obey the law to receive the blessings of God. Let's face it, we don't have to do everything right in this life to be made new and to have renewal and to have hope and to build. And I don't know the legal status of the parents, and I never asked. But what I saw in the eyes of that boy was a deep appreciation because his parents had a dream for him. And he had worked hard all through his schooling, had achieved much, and had managed to get himself not just into Harvard, but Stanford, etc. He's one of those kind of kids. And he wanted to make his parents proud in a place where he knew that his efforts, his work, could enter into and participate with the hard work of others, just like that effort that built the Renaissance Center in Detroit. He wanted to build a life, not for his sake, for his family, and for his family to come. And the Lord our God gives us more than dreams. The Lord our God gives us a vision of what this life can be, and ultimately what this life is really all about. It's not a Maserati and a fat cigar and a 35-year-old female when you're in your 70s. What this life is all about is entering into the greatest, grandest enterprise of all history. And that is the promise of God that through you, Jacob, and your family, all the nations of the world will be blessed. That we might enter into the great enterprise of God that fulfills the blessings of all nations. Toward the end, that at the name of Jesus, every knee would bow and every tongue would confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Will you bow with me in prayer? And Lord, as we survey our own lives, as we survey those moments when we were pursuing happiness, but then in turn formed by suffering, and found ourselves having to rely not just on us, but on others, and ultimately find our final reliance upon you. We thank you, O Lord, for carrying us on in our journeys and bringing us to a place where our lives might enter in the abundant life that you have prepared for us. We thank you and praise you in Jesus' name.